Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
My name is Sheryl Ramstad. I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is right up at the Canadian border in the United States. I am recently retired, but I published a book, spent a few years I've had since retirement, writing a book entitled Living Life Full Throttle, Surviving, Serving, and Summiting. This book tells about my having survived less than a 1% chance that the doctors gave me after I was in a catastrophic airplane crash on my first solo flight. The engine quit when I was over downtown St. Paul, the Mississippi River, the interstate, and all of a sudden the plane was plummeting to the ground. On the way down, a wing was torn off by a power line, and it caught the entire cockpit on fire, and the gas tank exploded. When it landed, it hit a tree, and I had to break the door down to get out. I then was able to get across the street, collapsed in front of a Catholic church where the priest came out and gave me last rites before a rescue worker took me to a local burn center where I spent the rest of the summer and the next couple of years recovering. I had to learn to use my hands again because my right hand was almost burned to the bone and they were thinking they'd have to amputate it. I had to learn to walk again, and I began my journey of recovery. So the book talks about seeing life through that lens that happened when I was 29 years old, but living my life through that lens has caused me to make various decisions. I've climbed Kilimanjaro. I've run several marathons. I've changed careers. I went back to college when I was 62 years old to get a master's and a doctorate in a totally different field. I've been a lawyer and a judge and run the prisons in Minnesota. And all of a sudden I was back as a first-year nursing student because I wanted to give back to burn survivors and go back to the hospital where I'd been hospitalized for so many months. I got my doctorate and then I went into healthcare administration. I was a senior administrator at a local healthcare organization that's a safety net hospital for the Twin Cities. That's Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. After doing that, I became a nursing professor, and I did that at 3 different schools. And then just a couple of years ago, I left the workplace. My husband's disabled, and I needed to be able to have a little more flexible schedule. And that's when I began writing my memoir. People had told me for many years, they said, you ought to write about your life. It sounds like you've gone through a lot. And I was always saying, I'm too busy to write about life. I'm too busy living it. But at that point, when I'd left the active workplace, I didn't have that excuse. So I thought I'd put it down in writing so that I'd leave a legacy for my children. I have 3 adult children and my grandchildren. I have 6 grandchildren. So that's what I did. It took about 2 years, and the book was published in late January of this year, 2025. It's now available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, and that's a little bit of my background. I've been a lawyer for 50 years. In fact, I just had my 50-year law school reunion, and it was interesting to see everybody after that long and what everybody had done. My career has been varied, but I'm very happy for the experiences I've had, and most importantly, I'm happy for the second chance I had to live my life because of that narrow escaping death when I was 29. I really didn't know if I'd live to be 30, and I've been all these years since.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Cheryl. Wow. And I suppose the question I really want to ask you is like that it's almost like for me with what you've shared is it's that key moment where your life has drastically changed. And do you look back at that moment and can you see that you did start living life differently? So, what had your years been like up to age 29? Were you as proactive with your life? Were you as outgoing? Were you always busy sort of living it and achieving and getting out there? Or did after, the plane crash, did something fundamentally switch for you and you just, I don't know, like reevaluated everything?
Yes, it did switch my focus. I had been very driven. I'd been succeeding in my career. I'd started a marriage. My husband and I were both planning a life where we would own our own plane and be able to take it on trips. He is the pilot, me as the co-pilot. Everything was great. I was really, so to speak, flying high. And then all of a sudden, at age 29, I was fighting for survival. And it really turned my focus from survival into service. And I lived the rest of my life with the focus on being grateful for every day and trying to make my life meaningful, not only for myself, but for others, trying to contribute to making the world a better place. So I did healthcare internationally. I went to several developing countries. I was able to work with burn survivors. For instance, in Peru, I introduced a form of burn treatment called compression garments. It had been the standard of care in the United States since the 1970s. And those little children in the Peruvian burn unit that I went to, that I worked at, had never seen them. And so as a result, they had a lot of scarring. Well, I was able to approach manufacturers in the United States and get patterns and get materials and get direction, and was able to get those things to a surgeon at the Peruvian Burn Center, and they were able to make their own garments. And now, as a result, each pediatric burn survivor at the Peruvian Burn Center in Lima has two sets of garments, and they don't suffer as badly from the bad scarring as they would have before. So it really changed my perspective and made me look for opportunities to be of service to others. And I have to say, that three things got me through the trauma of multiple surgeries, of coming so close to not making it. The doctors were surprised that I made it, quite frankly. They gave me a 1% chance of survival. And it gave me a new focus that I need to live each day and make the most of it. And had it not been for my faith, my family, and my friends, truthfully, I wouldn't have made it. So those three things, my faith, my family, and my friends, became central to my life thereafter.
Were you quite religious before that?
I was a believer. I attended church, but I didn't follow the Lord's lead as much as I did later in life. Later in life, it caused me to really listen and do things that were unexpected. I had left the bench. I was appointed a judge when I was only 32 years old. I was the youngest judge appointed in the state at that time. And after 4 years, I left the bench, and I didn't realize why I was being led to do so. But there was a whole different path I was led to do, and I was able to eventually serve in the governor's cabinet, run the prisons in Minnesota, make quite a few changes to reduce recidivism in our state in the areas of chemical dependency, mental health, faith-based facilities, and higher education. I did my research and found that those were the four areas where recidivism was dramatically reduced if there were resources and focus spent in those areas. And so I set out to do that, and we were able to do a lot in the 4 years I served. Then thereafter, I went back to school, which again, went back on the bench. I was serving as a judge again, and I felt led to go back to college. Now, I hadn't had many sciences in college. I did one geology course. Otherwise, I was in social sciences because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So I began taking the prerequisites for nursing as a second career because I wanted to be at the bedside of burn survivors who, like myself, may have gotten discouraged, but I wanted to give them encouragement that there was a life to be lived after burns. So while I was sitting full-time as a judge, I took my prerequisites in sciences one at a time. It took each semester one course for 4 years before I made the requisite prerequisites to be able to apply for nursing school. I then applied to the University of Minnesota, which had a program that was highly sought after. They only accepted 64 people and they had 9 times that many applicants. And at the age of 62, I didn't know if they'd think that I was worth the investment on their part to provide one of those 64 spots for me. But lo and behold, they did. And so what I did without telling anybody where I was going or what I was doing, I resigned my judgeship and went back to school full time. That was quite a shock because I hadn't been in the classroom for many, many years. Everything had changed. It was now computerized research, computerized drop boxes, phone or chats online. And yet I felt led to do that. And so I think that was definitely could be attributed to the fact that I was viewing my life differently after my crash than I had been before. It wasn't what other people thought of me that was important, or what other people thought I should do, but it was what I personally felt led to do. And that's the course my life took thereafter.
One of the words you mentioned was, and I think it's very sort of a gentle way of describing it, is sort of that feeling, when people are feeling discouraged and you wanted them to feel encouraged. And obviously you have been in through some very sort of dark and traumatic times. And whenever, I suppose, mentally or emotionally, you do feel discouraged, whether it's in terms of your, the rehabilitation you were going through, the fact that it was, you spent 4 years going back, getting these qualifications, which does take, time and commitment. When you are going through these dark and challenging times, how do you keep going? Like, what are the tips and tricks that you're using? Obviously, you mentioned faith and family and friends, but is there anything else that you're doing or any other words of wisdom that you could share, especially for other women who are feeling discouraged at the moment?
Yes. And instead of asking why me, I asked what next. And I looked toward the future, not the past, not trying to figure out why adversity had come my way, but what I could make that was positive out of the future. So I think it was that attitude that caused me to continue to grow, continue to look for new opportunities, and really get over those dark times. I also had a very strong family support system, people who really believed in me, and I had my faith to fall back on. So yes, there have been discouraging times. I think we all have them. And yet when we do, it's a matter of persevering and relying on those aspects of our life that have brought us strength from the past and that support our endeavors. And so I've been very fortunate that I've had a very strong family and friend support, and that I've been close to my faith. Those have been the keys. But I think that attitude of not why me, but what next has really gotten me through a lot.
How was it writing your book? But, having to relive moments which maybe that you had already processed and gone through or hadn't processed and you just locked away or tucked away, but having to revisit these very key moments, these very challenging, life-changing moments. Did that affect you again, like emotionally, or had you already processed everything back when it had happened?
Oh no, it's been a lifelong process. Even now, when I'm asked to speak about it, and I've got some upcoming speaking engagements, I get choked up at certain points when I think back and can put myself right back when that engine quit. I can visualize it as if it were 10 minutes ago and what my feelings were and how I thought I'd die, but I didn't want to take anyone else with me. I didn't want anyone else to die with me. And so I looked for a place I could put the plane down, and there was no place. And ended up crashing 10 feet from a woman sunbathing in her backyard. Was so grateful that nobody else was killed in that crash and that I was able to survive. So, yes, I have relived it to a certain extent, and I've had to be pushed at sometimes. I've worked with an editor who's really said, don't write like a lawyer, write like a person telling your story. Be sure to get at the emotional side of it. And so it's been, in a way, therapeutic, but I think that it will be a lifelong process for me to put all the feelings in perspective and continue to live remembering that nobody's promised tomorrow. We all have to make the most of today and do what we can to make the world a better place while we're in it.
So your book is it's surviving, serving, and summiting. You've mentioned sort of Peru, but I'd love for you to share more about the serving that you've done and what that form that took.
I have been in a variety of roles serving the public in public service positions. I was a federal prosecutor. I was a public defender. I was a judge for 14 years. I ran the prisons in Minnesota for 4 years. And I've been very active in the community. I was chair of the YMCA board of directors, on the Children's Hospital board. I've been on the Hospital Foundation board for the Burns Center that I was at. I've been on the board of the Center for the Victims of Torture. I've sought out and been asked to serve in various positions that I've typically said yes. Right now, I'm on a board called the Minnesota Parole Board. It's the first time in the history of the state that we've had a group of people appointed by the governor. There were 4 of us appointed by the governor of Minnesota to decide when people who've been sentenced to life imprisonment for first-degree murder can be released safely into the community. And that's a heavy responsibility. We have hearing dates twice a month. We have files that are 3 inches thick. And these people have served oftentimes over 25 years in prison. And to balance that risk to public safety against their personal rights to have the rest of their life in freedom is a weighty responsibility. We hear from the victims, and we realize from their testimony that the crime, the loss of their loved one, is still very real in their mind and in their lives. And so it's a real weighty decision-making process. I also serve as a guardian ad litem for children who are found in need of protection. They've been removed from their home, oftentimes for reasons of being out of control, a home that can't take care of them because there's nobody there to take care of them. And trying to be a guardian ad litem for them means to try to be an advocate for them, for what's in the best interests of that child. So I'm still continuing to look for opportunities to be of service at this point in my life. It's just changed a little in terms of the focus.
Yeah. Summiting. Do you want to share more about summiting and some of the mountains that you summited?
Certainly. Well, it started when I was having coffee with a friend of mine, a woman who I'd known through our children for many years. And she was on the board of an organization called Books for Africa. And Books for Africa is a Minnesota-based organization that collects books that otherwise would have gone to the landfill and sends them in containers to countries in Africa that have no books for their children. And the founder of this organization was turning 70 years old, wanted to use climbing Mount Kilimanjaro as an opportunity on his 70th birthday to transmit the 1 millionth book to the country of Tanzania. So she said, why don't you go with me? And it sounded like a great challenge. I always look for challenges and opportunities to grow. So I spent several months getting ready for that climb. It's the highest mountain in Africa, 19,321 feet. We're at a relatively low level here in Minnesota, so I had to acclimate. I went to mountainous areas like Breckenridge, Colorado, and climbed the mountains with a backpack full of bricks on my back. I also went to a building that's the highest one in Minneapolis, which is, 60 floors. And over the lunch hour, I'd go up those steps with a backpack full of bricks. And I was very committed to trying to make it to the top, and raised money for the Books for Africa in the process of doing so. When it came time for the climb, there were 15 of us who went, and only half of us made it to the summit. But I was fortunate enough to be able to do so. The woman who'd persuaded me to go up to the mountain and raise money for Books for Africa was unfortunately forced to turn back the day before. It's a 5-day climb, and the day before we were able to summit, she wanted to go lie down in a cave, and that, of course, meant she had hypothermia and would have died. And she was a very strong-willed woman that nobody was going to tell her what to do, except I was able to convince her, because I'm equally or even stronger willed than she is. And I'd known her for long enough that I had credibility with her to convince her to go down, that it was a life-saving gesture for her. And afterwards, she thanked me for saving her life. So I continued up to the top. It was a different climb without her at my side, but I felt like when I reached the summit, I did so for both of us, because she was very much with me in spirit, and I needed to finish that climb for the sake of both of our journeys.
One of the things that just impresses me, and I'm sure just impresses the listeners, is the sheer amount of things that you have done and achieved throughout the years, the service that you have provided, going off to climb Kilimanjaro, going back to school, getting your master's, getting your doctorate. How do you decide what to do? I think it was Helen Keller who said, you do have just one precious life, and making that decision, well, where do I spend my time? Where do I spend my focus? What advice would you have for other women who are maybe struggling, I suppose, to find their purpose, or they've got so many different options and, the different things that they could do or where they could focus their time and their energy? Would you have any advice around that?
Well, I have a few simple principles that I always seem to fall back on. One is I want to have no regrets. When I go to the grave, I want to have done what I could and what I felt led to do. Hence, when I wrote the book, I didn't know if I'd be able to finish it. I didn't know if I was an author of a memoir, because I'd been writing legal things most of my career. But I didn't want to have the regret of thinking, what if I had? Should I have? And so I thought, well, I'll try. And if I, the old saying, unless you try, how do you know? Better to have tried and failed than never to have tried at all. And so I tried, and lo and behold, I was able to finish the book. Same with Kilimanjaro, climbing Kilimanjaro. Again, I didn't know if I had it in me. I wasn't a mountain climber. I'd run marathons as part of my recovery from training from getting over the burns that I had. One of the nurses at my bedside had challenged me when I was unable to even stand up. She saw a picture of me running a race a week before my airplane crash, and she said, mark my words, in 2 years you'll be running a marathon and I'll be at the finish line to cheer you on. Well, that stuck in my mind, and it became a challenge to me. And again, I didn't want to have a regret of not having tried. And so I started training for it. And lo and behold, a year and 11 months after my crash, in a full body compression suit, I was crossing the finish line. And so no regrets. And then another motto, if you will, is do nothing in moderation. I give my whole heart to any endeavor that I try. And again, better to have tried and failed than never to have tried at all. So I feel by giving it my all, I will have no regrets. And so even when I went back to school at the age of 62, I had no idea what it would be like to be a student again. And I took it one course at a time and gained some confidence. And then when I started in the program, when they accepted me into this competitive program, it was quite a challenge to even find the classroom, let alone to get on the computer and do some of the things that I was unfamiliar with doing, chat rooms and filing assignments through the Dropbox and things like that. But again, I didn't want any regrets, and I thought, how will I know unless I've tried? And quite frankly, other people have helped me along the way. Younger students in my cohort who were my children's age stepped in, and I wasn't afraid to admit that things were different than I had been accustomed to. And they were right there beside me, willing to help me along the way. So don't be afraid to ask others for help, and don't be afraid to admit your shortcomings. But always keep in mind that you want to try, even if it means failure, rather than not try at all, so that you don't go to the grave with any regrets.
Kilimanjaro is in Africa, which is obviously over the Atlantic Ocean for you. So I'm going to make the assumption that you got on a plane. Was there a fear behind that you needed to face?
That's a really good question. And actually, my flight to Kilimanjaro was a few years after I'd taken my first flight, which was a real harrowing one. I was in the governor's cabinet, and I needed to be able to chat with the governor about a program a faith-based program that I wanted to try in Minnesota. And our governor had recently said that religion is for the weak-minded. So I knew I had a heavy lift in convincing him. But I also knew that if I could get him one-on-one, it was Jesse Ventura was the governor at the time. He believed in results. And so the only way that I thought that I could get him one-on-one, apart from his staff who would possibly influence him, was to invite him to fly in a small plane to a prison opening where there would only be room enough for my deputy commissioner, the pilot, the governor, and me. No room for his staff. Well, needless to say, it was my first flight in a small plane since my crash, and I was filled with trepidation. And when I got on the plane, I'll never forget the governor saying that his wife was a white knuckle flyer and that he'd help me through it. Well, I succeeded on that flight in getting his concurrence to go ahead with this first-time program in Minnesota. And gradually thereafter, I was able to fly more and more. And since that time, I've flown actually over almost 3 million miles commercially. I've gone to Africa several times on international mission work to help in the medical field. And I've gone to Central and South America as well. And so I've really been able to overcome a fear of getting back on a plane, but it started slowly with that small plane. Since then, I readily admit I avoid planes that are smaller than large jets. I usually don't like to go on planes that are smaller than about 76 passengers. I always sit in the front row, even though that's not the safest place on an airplane to be. But I have a case of claustrophobia as a result of having been in that burning cockpit where I had to break the door down to get out when my own plane crashed. And this claustrophobia is real. So if I don't sit in a space that's open and I'm in a row that people are behind and ahead of me and I'm inside, even the window seat, I become claustrophobic. And so I always take those precautions when I fly. There have been a few times where in rough weather, it's been a reliving of what it was like when I didn't know if I'd survive. And those times I've just I've prayed, I've talked to the passengers that I've talked to the flight crew. I've told them, my trepidation. And fortunately, since that time, I haven't come close to anything like when I was 29 years old, but it has brought back memories of what it was like during that time. In addition, every time there's a plane crash, I relive what it was like in those final seconds before, when I knew my plane was going down, but before it crashed. I relive that. And I know feel for the people who've not survived those crashes, and feel for their families, and know the long journey that it is, and realize again how fortunate I am to have had a second chance at my life.
What must be really fascinating is almost like how maybe the support has changed over the past sort of 30, 35 years. And like PTSD wasn't a thing when you were 20, well, probably wasn't a thing when you were 29 years old. And then the mental health and the support that is available for people who have been through traumatic experiences, but what's available now compared to what you maybe had back in the day is just so different.
That's so true. In fact, when I was in nursing school, I went back to the burn unit where I'd been a patient and conducted support groups. I was actually an employee of the burn unit. And it was interesting, Sarah, because to a person, the people who had gone through catastrophic burns, life-changing situations, would never have wanted to go through it again. But to a person, they almost always said that they came out the other side in a better frame of mind, in a different position, not happy to have had the trauma, but glad to have gotten to the point where they were now living their lives differently.
Do you think the experience has changed how you've brought up your children? And what I mean by that is, in my head, there's almost two things that could happen. One, it could be the fear of letting your children do anything because actually something really horrific and horrendous could happen to them. And you almost want to protect them and wrap them in cotton wool so they don't have to go through anything that you went through. Or on the flip side of that, you could be bringing up your children as in like, you've got one life. You are going to live it. You are going to be getting out there. You're going to be trying everything. I want you to really live, to really appreciate this time on earth that you have available. And I know it's probably not as black and white as that, either the dealing with the fear, but also the living. But do you understand the question that I'm asking?
Yes, definitely. And I have 3 children. My oldest is now in her early 40s. My youngest is in his late 30s, or my youngest daughter is in her late 30s. And I have tried to encourage them to follow their hearts, to follow where they feel led. I have tried not to stand in their way. I've tried to make sure that they know the risks and they know to be cautious, that none of us expects to be the headline in the newspaper like I was. Nobody expects to be in a catastrophic accident like I was. But you take all the proper precautions that you can, make the best judgment based on the facts as you know them, and then go forward to live your life. And my children have all done so. And I think that they've appreciated the opportunities that they've had and recognized that they've had responsibilities to make sure that they were responsible for decision-making that was prudent. And now with their own children, it's been interesting watching them because they are giving their children the same kind of latitude, but also guidance. It's not a matter of saying, go do it, you can do anything, but it's a matter of making sure that they understand the risks and that they take proper precautions and that they have the opportunities to live their lives as fully as they can, given taking into account the risks and making the proper precautions.
Congratulations on the book, and congratulations on all of the amazing things that you've achieved. And what's next for you? What are you hoping to achieve? What's on your bucket list? What are your goals? What's the next sort of challenge?
That's such a good question, Sarah. And as I said, instead of saying, why me, I always ask, what next? And so I've asked myself that question many times. And I'm in the discernment phase where I have a lot of different avenues that I've considered pursuing. One is, pursuing further education. I don't know at my stage in life if that would be a good investment of my time or resources, but I have an intellectual curiosity to learn more and I'm a lifelong learner. Another is to perhaps try another book, because my book, Living Life Full Throttle, Surviving, Serving, and Summiting, really goes through my earlier years, but there's been a lot that's happened since then. I've had two parents who passed away. I've had a brother who's passed away. I've had a husband who's disabled. I've learned some things through life's experiences that may be valuable to share with other people. So that's been one thought I've had. For the time being, I'm trying to make sure that I encourage people to live their life full throttle, because you don't have to be in an airplane crash to be able to do so. It's just a matter of that perspective of, I'm not promised tomorrow, so I'm going to do the best I can today to make the world a better place, and invest my time and energy in ways that I think I can do so. So I'm still discerning is the short answer to your question.
Cheryl, how can people find out more information about you and the book? Where are you most active online?
Yes, my book, Living Life Full Throttle, Surviving, Serving, and Summiting, which is a book for anybody who's gone through any kind of adversity. You don't have to have been burned in a horrific plane crash like I was, but we all have adversity in our lives. And I think this book is very encouraging and shows people a mindset and opportunities that can exist where you can make the most of your life. So it's available on Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, and on Goodreads. I also have a website at SherylRamstadAuthor.com. That's SherylRamstadAuthor.com. And through that website, and my email address is SherylRamstadAuthor@gmail.com. I answer any emails that I get. I'm happy to connect with anyone who's interested in any aspect of what I might do to help in their journey, because we all have our journeys, and I want to be of as much help to others as I can be.
Absolutely. And your book, Living Life Full Throttle, was also the 2025 New York City Big Book Award distinguished favorite. So massive congratulations on that. And Cheryl, you've dropped so many amazing pieces of top tips and advice already. But I'd love for you to have the final words of advice for other women listening who do want to live life full throttle and to take on new challenges and new adventures, or, study more, or go climb Kilimanjaro, or run a marathon, whatever it may be. What's the final words of advice that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think my advice would be, Sarah, that don't be guided by your fear, but be guided by the facts, and be guided by the evidence, and do what you feel led to do, so that you do not go to your grave with any regrets. And if you do that, I think you'll find you'll feel fulfilled. You'll make a contribution to the world, making the world a better place.
Cheryl, thank you so much for sharing more of your story with us, and for spending the time to write your book, Living Life Full Throttle. It's been wonderful to chat to you today, and I can't wait to see what you're going to be achieving next.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been great talking to you. I really appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Hello, tribe. How are we all doing? It's Sarah here, the host of the Tough Girl podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges. I hope you're all keeping super well and enjoying the month of December. So just a couple of sort of announcements and a little bit of information to share. So first thing is the National Outdoor Expo in Birmingham is happening next year on the 21st and the 22nd of March. So it's over a weekend. It's held at the NEC in Birmingham. And this is an amazing show. So I'm just going to read you the little bit of bump. So the National Outdoor Expo is a consumer exhibition for those who love getting outdoors. The expo attracts enthusiasts across a range of recreational activities, whether they are avid participants or with a keen interest to access new activities. The event has a focus on walking and hiking, running, climbing, camping and eating outdoors, active adventure and travel experiences, water sports, bushcraft, survival and much more. The National Outdoor Expo provides the perfect retail environment for visitors to meet their trusted brands, discover new ones and enjoy an inspired shopping experience at the beginning of the outdoor season. So I am one of the ambassadors, and because I am an ambassador, I have a code that you can use to get a free ticket. The code is SWilliams, so SWILLIAMS. I was like, I've got how to spell my name. So discount code SWilliams, and then you will get a free ticket. So it's a massive 2-day event. There's like 150 exhibitors. There's like 20,000 plus visitors. There is an outdoor stage. There's open water swimming on the lake. There's live cooking demonstrations. There's paddle sports on the lake. You can get to have a go at bushcraft, and you can just sort of meet and greet loads of people, loads of people who just love adventure and the outdoors. Now, just to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be able to make the NEC in 2026. It is in my diary, but I'm just not sure what my plans are at the moment. So even if you're not 100% sure whether you're going to make it or not, pop the dates in your diary just so that you know it is happening. So those dates again are the 21st, the 22nd of March, and the website is nationaloutdoorexpo.com. I do just want to say 2 shout outs to 2 new patrons. So Alvin, thank you so much for signing up as a patron. I really do appreciate it. And also want to say a massive thank you to Kirsty as well. Thank you so much for signing up as a patron. So what does it mean when I say a patron? Patrons are the supporters of the Tough Girl podcast. So it does cost money to host, to record, to put everything together behind the scenes, for the website and to produce this content. It's not only just sort of like my time for recording and for editing and producing it, but there's a lot of stuff which goes into the back end which you don't really get to see. You just get to see the finished product. And obviously I've talked about my mission quite a lot, but the mission is to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. So having a regular source of financial income or a regular source of income coming in every month makes a massive difference in how I can manage my costs and make sure that there's enough money coming in each month so that I can cover all of the running costs and have a little bit of income coming in to support me as well. So if you do want to pay it forward, you enjoy listening to the podcast, then I'd love for you to visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. And on the Patreon website, there's 2 options. You can either become like an annual member or you can become a monthly member. And I think there's different levels. So whether you want to pay it in US dollars or Aussie dollars or sterling, New Zealand dollars, Singaporean dollars, you can pay it in your currency. I work in sterling and US dollars. It sort of doesn't really make a difference where the money is coming from. It gets converted into US dollars and then into sterling for me. But yeah, different levels of support. So if you can afford, you're in a financially strong place at the moment, you've enjoyed the podcast and you want to pay it forward, that is one of the best ways that you can do it, is signing up as a patron. Look, I also totally get, if you're not in the financial space at the moment where you can afford but you still want to listen, please continue listening. That is the most important thing. But you can still tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. You can talk about it on your social media, on your Facebook, on Instagram. You can tag me and post at Tough Girl Challenges. Just talking about the topics that come up is incredibly powerful as well, because that is how we get the stories out there. These incredible women doing these amazing challenges. This is how we get other women inspired to take on their own different adventures and challenges, and also to motivate and inspire you to take on your next adventure and a challenge. So if you're not 100% sure where to start, if this is your first podcast that you've listened to, thank you so much. Please go and visit toughgirlchallenges.com. The website is where you're going to get the bulk of the information, well, pretty much all the information. There's a Start Here page. There's more information about me, the mission, the patrons and supporters. There's more information about the Tough Girl challenges that I've been on, from Tiara Roa Trail to the Wales Coast Path, as well as all the different podcast episodes going back to 2015. There's a Tough Girl blog, which has lots of information on. And then the resources section, where the episodes have been broken down into different categories, from ocean rowers to ultra runners to thru hikers to Guinness World Record holders to world travelers, sailors to skiers and snowboarders to adaptive athletes, through to different challenges such as Marathon des Sars, Mount Aconcagua, Mount Everest, New Zealand, etc. So hopefully you will find that of interest. Thank you so much for listening. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.